Welcome to Quest Givers. As some astute viewers may have already realized, this is the month of monsters, and we're going to be talking about timers and monsters in this video.
If you're looking for adventure, grab the modules each month to support the channel and play the campaign with your gaming group. You're sure to get hooked on adventure.
And don't forget to check out questgivers.com. It helps support these videos so we can bring them to you every Friday. And don't forget our Kickstarter on September 1st.
Yes, that's for the whole North Road campaign as a book. So that's going to be really cool. That's in a few months' time. This video is about monsters and timing, or timers and monsters. So what is a timer? So a timer is something that, you know, it's like when you boil an egg and you've got a little timer that you turn, and then you go tick, 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 bing, and something happens, the egg is ready. Well, in your game, you essentially can do the same thing with monsters, and this actually changes the dynamic of the combats or the encounters with monsters that are actually happening in your game, and it changes the way the players perceive. Now, obviously, in the past few videos, we've been talking about various different aspects of monsters and meta information and that kind of stuff, but this is going to be now more about timing.
I think an easy way to start that most people would understand are the recharge abilities of monsters from 5th edition, right? You know, dragons and that kind of thing. You have to roll a die, and if you get the number that you need or above, then the monster recharges that ability. So that is a built-in timer for the monster. So the monster probably is not going to be able to use that ability every round, right? That mechanically is just a built-in timer. So that's a great way to think about it. But you can have, you know, specific amount of time between certain things, or you can have it variable like that, where you roll, and if you get the roll, then then you know, they're able to use that ability again. As
we did in Messenger in the Woods, you also have an actual timer in terms of the entire session. It counts down to a specific thing that's happening. But we're obviously bringing this down to the encounter level, and you'll see this in games like ICRPG, where it uses timers in almost every single encounter. So you roll a dice, and in that amount of rounds, something is going to happen. You change the way that the encounter is happening. What this tends to do, especially when you're fighting horrible fantasy monsters, is it builds a sense of dread. So the game Dread with the Jenga tower, you don't roll dice, you pull blocks out of the Jenga tower. That in itself is a timer. The end is nigh. The more things you pull out, the less likely it is you're going to survive. You're doing the same thing with rolling a dice and then counting down the rounds. But what about something like reloading? You know, like if a character's run out of ammunition, what does that do?
Yes, that can give you the moment to maybe take that healing potion or do that extra action that you don't have to defend yourself from. So that could tie into kind of following the pattern of what's going on. So say maybe something's shooting a crossbow at you, right? And it can't reload the crossbow every round. It loads it, it shoots it, and then it has to crank it again and load it again. So you might have a round to do something, right? So you can use that time. You can kind of use that counter that the monster is giving you to do something. Or you could watch a monster go through its rounds and what it does, and maybe it'll do something the first round, and then it'll recharge that ability and do something else the next round, and then do something else. So you can, and if it seems to be a pattern, you can time your actions or whatever you want to do to that timer, the timer of the monster, how the actions it does on a particular pattern. And so that can be a really fun way to actually use a timer also.
Yeah, monsters also may have routines in the way that they actually perform their actions. So the way that's sort of easy to demonstrate this is if you have a cat and you're playing with a cat toy with a cat, they're all fight, but then they stop for 2 minutes and have to lick themselves. You can do that with monsters. You can think of a way that a monster will change its routine mid-encounter, which gives you a break or a chance to escape or a chance to, build a wall, depending on how long the monster takes. These sort of things you can build in as well. That, again, it's all about changing the dynamic of what's happening so that it's not just throwing dice at bags of numbers. That's you know, you're just playing a board game then, really, if you're doing that.
And you know, a good example of a timered monster in our modules is a warp ferret. So if it teleports into you and starts eating its way out, you know, it might be 1d4 rounds before that thing gets out, you know, so it's going to do that damage every round, and you know, you'd actually have to injure yourself to try to injure the warp ferret if you want to do that. So that's a nice timer. Also, you can do that kind of stuff. What
comes into it is you also have the immediate needs of the monster may be met. So for instance, if you come across a hungry monster that's eating a rotting cow carcass, you know, it takes 1d4 rounds to finish its meal. So you have like 1d rounds to try to attack it. It's just defending with its big tail while it's trying to eat this cow. But after 1d4 rounds, it's no longer hungry. It's finished its meal. Now the real battle begins. So you've kind of especially if you've got lower level characters that kind of need to wear the monster down a little bit in order to actually take it down. That's when you can use these kind of natural events of the immediate need of the monster to wear it down, and then it's a little bit easier to kill. That will work very, very well for you. But then remember the changing immediate needs of the monster. So now the immediate need has changed from hunger to protection, or to defending, or protecting its young from your assault, or something like that. You've now switched the immediate need of the monster, and so the encounter will switch as well and will change dramatically. What about waves of monsters?
Oh yeah, that's another great one, because yeah, that's a timer in itself, right? So you get a wave of monsters. Maybe they're fairly easy to kill. You know, you're going to use up your resources as you do that. But then you have a certain amount of time, and then you see another group charging at you from another way, or you know, the same, you know, different ways. There's groups of monsters coming, and so you have a certain amount of time before they get to you and start fighting. That can really be exciting and dynamic, and a great timer for the players. Maybe they have to do something before the waves just overwhelm them, because eventually they're going to get overwhelmed. And we do have that in our Messenger in the Woods module. There's a point where there's these waves of monsters, and you've got to decide what you're going to do, or you're just going to get overwhelmed, right?
We don't just say do these things, and you know, we practice what we preach. So you know, when you actually purchase the models and you go through them, you'll see that we've actually used this. So you get in each of the models, there's different techniques that we've used. So you get to try it out in your game. If you're a new GM, we understand that. We want to give you that experience, change the flavor, change the dynamic. So each session you play of the campaign is different from the previous one. There are some things that tie them all together, obviously, because it's a long campaign, it's a story. But each one is actually a specific story in and of itself, with different mechanics, with different ways of doing things. So you will learn a lot, and that's, you know, that's part of our passion as quest givers, not only to just write things for you to buy, but write things that will actually help you in writing your own campaigns. You know, and we've got PDFs on the website that do that as well. But what about changes in the environment and using triggers to change the environment?
That is great, because changing the environment is one of the most dynamic things you can do to up the encounter, right? But what you could do is you could even chain like timed events, right? So say you're in a dragon's lair and the dragon's smashing in the wall with its tail or something, and stalagmites are falling from stalactites are falling from the ceiling, and then you know you roll it. Maybe you roll a d4, and that's how long until it does the next thing. So maybe it leaps on the ground and the ground just shakes and cracks, and you know, then you roll another d4 and then it does something else. So it keeps like upping the game. Like the longer you take to, you know, defeat this enemy, the more extreme these things are getting. So you're kind of chaining these timed events. So yeah, changing the environment is a great thing to do, and using timers for that really gives the players, I think, a sense of dread, right?
Scotty has used the phrase tiered catastrophes before. It's like it just starts low level and just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's the kind of stuff we love to do, you know, because it really does make the game far more interesting, you know, just not from a player's perspective, but also from a GM's perspective, because how do I make the situation even more dire and even worse? You know, it's like the crack opens and then you know, the ceiling collapses and then the lava bubbles up, and then like what else happens, you know? Like, it just gets worse and worse, and then the river comes in from and hot steam fills the cavern. It's just, you're piling on the problems. And as we talked about monsters as problems to solve, part of that aspect is the environment that the monster is in forms part of the problem that the player has to solve. If you want to check out that video, it's up in the, I'm pointing all over the show. It's up there, that corner, up above Scotty's shoulder there. It's there somewhere. So yeah, what other, is there anything? I think we've covered most of them. If we haven't, then in the argument section below, tell us what other kind of timers you may have used, so that the rest of the community that follows us will be able to learn from your experiences as well.
Hey friend, thanks again for watching Quest Givers. Make sure to check out our website, questgivers.com. Look out for our Kickstarter on September 1st. Hope to see you then. And until then, we'll see you next Friday with a new bid. Right, Gareth?
Yep, we'll see you then. Cheers now. See ya. Goodbye. Sayonara.